Now, you may recognize our next guest from the dozens of different TV shows he's been a part of, but chances are you know his voice from his work on your favorite space opera. Today we have actor Raphael Sbarge here joining the show. Thank you so much.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, for our listeners who haven't yet tuned in, can you give us a little bit of a taste, you'd say, of your most recognized video game voiced character?
Talk to me. As Kaidan Alenko, people usually probably would know something along the lines of this.
Yeah, Kaidan Alenko is usually what they identify. Of course, if they are BioWare aficionados, they may know you as Cartho from Knights of the Old Republic as well, right?
Right, Cartho, right, absolutely.
Or Nassi, excuse me.
Right, no worries. And then there's also the Star Wars series. There's a character named Scorch that people are very love as well. And yeah, I mean, I've been very blessed with being able to work with these wonderful games. BioWare is an unbelievable company out of Edmonton, and they just do astonishing work and really just care so deeply about really providing just an extraordinary experience for their end user, that is you. You know, the folks who are Mass Effect fans are, I mean, at the end of the day, sort of on par with sort of religious zealots.
Very close to. I've seen some shrines to Kaidan Alenko throughout the internet, and of course to the adverse too, of those lamenting the fact that they had to bring him. They wish they killed him at Vermeer. So that must be an interesting mix of emotions for you as an actor.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I meet people sometimes and they say, "Oh, I'm so sorry I killed you," you know, and I say, "Don't worry, it happens." You know, it happens. I mean, the great thing about that game is really how sort of complex and imaginative and how deep the storytelling is, and you know, in terms of where it takes you and how. I don't know, just, you know, from an acting point of view anyway, what's so thrilling is just that unlike so many other games that sometimes we're asked to sort of come in and, you know, essentially turn our voices into hamburger just because we're screaming and screaming and screaming. You know, in this case, they're really character-based games, and they are have very complex relationships that then require, you know, oftentimes just really interesting dimensionality between, you know, whether it be man-woman scenes, you know, commander, you know, and cadence scenes, and with an undertone or a subtext that goes along with it, and they're just so wonderfully written. It's just a delight to be a part of.
Guess we're old soldiers, hey Shepard? Yeah, I guess we are. We know the score. We know this is goodbye.
Absolutely. Now, how did you first make the transition into voice acting? Because I know you've been working in TV and movies for quite some time, and then all of a sudden you pop in on the scene, and now you're, I would say, one of the more recognized voices of video game characters in the industry.
Cheers. Well, I mean, you know, honestly, I come out of the theater. I've done a lot of Broadway and off-Broadway work back in New York City, and I that was all my training. At some point, those of us who work in the theater realize that we actually have to make a living, and you begin to sort of look at doing commercials and voiceovers and other things, and then from that then leads to, you know, I mean, games as a sort of a medium. I guess it's now about, is it about 15, 18 years ago, really started to sort of take off, and they were looking for actors, really good actors, and they didn't need celebrities, and they didn't need people who, you know, were famous or had TV cue. They just wanted people with great voices and who could, you know, act the hell out of these, you know, wonderful characters that they were starting to write.
Absolutely. Now, starting a little bit earlier, because like you said, it's been close to 15 years when they needed, you know, some talented actors to be a part of these growing games. We're going to start off with Karth for Knights of the Old Republic. You touched on it a bit there. What would be a typical day or session of voicing a character like that early on, essentially, in the development of video game acting, kind of as a more prevalent thing in the industry?
I got the revenge I always wanted when Saul died, but it hasn't brought me the peace that I thought it would. All I can think of now is the promise that I made to protect you from what's going to come. It's given me a reason to look past simple revenge.
I mean, invariably, they're 4-hour sessions. And that doesn't sound like a lot of time, right? I mean, you think, gee whiz, I can work for 4 hours. again, shy of, some bathroom breaks and maybe a cup of coffee halfway through, it's just you nonstop talking and kind of going through page after page of dialogue. What would happen is that you get there, say at 9, and you would just start basically laying it down. And invariably you would do, to try and find, whether it be, the right combination of elements, emotion, urgency, or to give them some choices, that is the animators some choices on the other end. You do many lines, 2, 3 times, 4 times sometimes to kind of get it right. The director's working with you to kind of say, a little more of this, a little more of that. And so, we would, back in those days, of course, we'd have pages, and we would just sort of, be delivered a stack, and then you would just kind of let them, let them fall to the floor. And, you would, when the stack was done on the music stand, you knew you were done.
Very similar, to the to your sort of theatrical background, kind of a similar working out the scene sort of thing, having the actual paper in your hand, getting it done in that way. Would you say, at least at the beginning of the industry, there are some real definite links between the two?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, again, when you work in a play, excuse me, you huddle around, the text, and you kind of, find your way through it, and you begin to kind of, make sense of, who's doing what, and what the dynamic is, and what the relationships are. And again, because, I mean, look, most people who play games, again, don't realize that when we're just laying the voice down, there's nothing to react to. I mean, you may have, guests screaming down on you in the, in the game, and again, it's me in a padded room and a microphone, so you have to.
And then it just says "Geth screaming down on you" sort of thing written on a piece of paper in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, there's just nothing there. So you've got to just sort of find your way to a place in your head where you can kind of create a sense that that's actually happening.
Normandy. The beacon is secure.
This is amazing. Actual working Prothean technology. Unbelievable.
It wasn't doing anything like that when they dug it up.
If you're lucky enough to, for goodness sakes, be able to work with in a company like BioWare, they just sort of take, what we do, which at the end of the day, we come in and do this for hours. They, of course, spend 3 years behind the scenes kind of, developing all the elements that kind of give it life. And then they meet and somehow make magic in the middle. I mean, I can say is that the actors, and there's some of the amazing actors working in games now, while, I've heard temp tracks sometimes of people who lay down their voices, just so they can get timings and stuff for the animators. While we come in at the very end, there's no question that a good voice actor really can make a difference and kind of bring it to life.
Do you get a real sense of, do you get a real sense of the entire representation of the character when you are having these sort of 4-hour disjointed sessions where, like you said, there's a lot of jumping around, there's a lot of reaction to whatever, because most of the time you're playing ancillary characters, to what the avatar, the actual player, has to do? Is it very, very difficult to know these are the representations of who Karth is, this is who Kaidan is, or are there several Kaidans? Are there several Karths? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I guess initially, look, I auditioned for the games. I mean, they heard something in my voice that seemed right for them, in terms of what their vision was for where they wanted to go. Karth had sort of a, was sort of a badass, sardonic, kind of a sarcastic kind of a guy. Sometimes they would say, well, it's this and it's that and it's this and it's that and it's this and it's that and it's this, and then go. In other words, all the backstory. And then at a certain point, I sort of said to them, it's okay. I sort of have a sense of it, and I have a sense of kind of where this guy lives. And in a way, I kind of made it up in my head and didn't need all the information. But I mean, some actors are different in a way. Some actors really need to know, every little bit. In the way I kind of work is I kind of go. I sort of take a leap and with, again, my imagination and what they give me in the story and kind of the foothold into, what you already know about the guy, I sort of jump from there.
Absolutely. Now, as Kaidan Alenko in the Mass Effect series, How has that experience been? And now that it's essentially all over, now that all 3 games have been cashed in, there's been amazing DLC associated with it. How does that feel now that Kaidan's story is done, something that you've been a part of for quite some time?
I've just been sitting here thinking.
Uh-oh. Okay, hit me with it.
Let me tell you something that I'm thinking about.
Okay.
I'm not the kind of guy who's the life of the party, who has a lot of friends.
Really?
No, it's true. I mean, some people even find my, integrity annoying.
Really?
No, seriously, Okay, fine. Well, now you're messing with me.
First of all, I was at PAX East back in Boston a few months ago with a lot of the development team, and really sort of the cerebral cortex of BioWare, and we were able to kind of meet the audience, and they a lot of people showed up to really kind of give them sort of the love and affection that they deserve for what they've done. I know that when the game, that is Mass Effect 3, came out, it hit a bit of a chord in a lot of fans who got upset, really upset about the fact that it was over, that they just actually effectively pulled the plug. It was done, and people flipped out. And what was so interesting about that is that BioWare really responded. They listened. I think they really took it very sort of soulfully, to heart, and tried to really begin to address it, speak to the fans, and then create additional downloadable content so that fans also felt that they could continue to play through and play in other areas of the game. What I also, and I said this publicly in this big panel that we did, even though on the one hand it really was incredibly sad, I think for not just the fans, but for these gentlemen and women who have spent a decade working on this game tirelessly, I know they're sad as well. There is something, however, kind of in the fact that it's over. In other words, that there is sort of a bookmark at the end of 1, 2, and 3. There's something about that makes it very precious in a way. It almost sort of gives it sort of like in a way, it almost makes it more special, more remarkable that it happened, that we shared this, that folks who were all part of Mass Effect have all been, taken this incredible journey, and that it has an end point. It's not to say that there's not sadness all the way around, but it is to say in this case that I believe that the sadness has been felt, by both the developers and the audience. As far as what's next, they've sort of said publicly that there's a Mass Effect 4 in development. I believe that it's probably going to be a series of new characters and probably a new universe. But I would imagine that they'll probably take the franchise and begin to kind of see where they would go next.
Maybe we'll hear you again as the great-grandfather of Kaidan or something like that.
right, exactly. As far as playing Kaidan, in a weird kind of way, and I said this at that same event, I feel like it's the closest I'll ever feel to what it feels like to be a Beatle,
Okay. Really? Okay, that's interesting.
As in the music group. Because the kind of the emotional connection that people have to the characters that they created are really unbelievable, just unbelievable. There's a story that happened, last, I guess 2 Thanksgivings ago. I had asked, I'd been asked by some fans by Twitter to record a letter from Mass Effect 2 that had been played.
Oh yeah.
Never actually recorded, and so I sort of laid it down, on my very own iPhone. One of those things where I kind of did it sort of as a scratch track, but laid it down and sort of over the Thanksgiving weekend, kind of on the down low, I kind of just sort of put it out there. Well, it went sort of insanely viral very quickly, and I didn't know how BioWare was going to react, but they actually ended up loving it, and they promoted it. We ended up having 30,000, 40,000 downloads of it. And what was also incredible was the fans, and again, these are Mass Effect fans who are just so passionate, so deeply feeling, and it just moves the heck out of me. But they went and they looked and they found out that I had actually started a nonprofit that actually raises money for the environment. It's a nonprofit that raises money for other nonprofits. Actually, it's called Greenwish, and they found this and on their own accord, and then they began sending money to the nonprofit, literally from Poland and England and Australia and Germany and parts of Canada. I mean, literally all over the world, people began writing in and saying thank you, and this is our way. We want to just say thank you back, and it was the most extraordinary experience I've ever had. That there would be kind of feel so in the midst of this enormous community, and to feel the kind of the love returned back, just for having put this out, just as a thank you to the fans.
Real compassion on the side of the fans to say your work as this character has meant so much for us, especially, like you said, that little tidbit that you added. I remember when that did go viral as Explosion, because I know the actress who plays Ashley voiced the same thing afterwards, and it was crazy, but it is pretty amazing to see that.
I reached out to her and said, "You want to do it as well?" And she said, "Yeah, okay."
And again, it was great, and it's something that perhaps a lot of people wouldn't experience, who just who buy the games and perhaps don't get as quite involved. But for this game, for the people who are invested in these characters, those little things like this, especially just the nature of what that letter was and how it affects the story, must have meant a lot. And it's great to see that there's dividends back. There's that wonderful relationship. So that's amazing. Yeah, I had no idea. That's incredible.
Really funny. I mean, I meet people sometimes at conventions or elsewhere, and they're literally shaking. I mean, when they, it means so much to them, and I'm just so touched by that. I mean, I just what this character is, and what they've been able to find. In terms of, I believe their feelings for these characters are very real, even though we live in this other world. I mean, they're very real. It's not me, but it's Kaidan, and I honor that.
How can you compare me to him?
Shepard, I don't know what you are, or who. Not since Cerberus rebuilt you. For all I know, you could be their puppet, controlled by the elusive man himself.
Kaidan,
Don't try to explain it. I don't think I'd understand anyway. I just want to know, is the person that I followed to hell and back, the person that I loved, are you still in there? Somewhere.
I had a really an interesting thing happen last week, actually. A friend of mine had actually, again, through this nonprofit, Greenwish, I've been looking for someone to kind of help me coordinate some of the duties that I have with it, because it's sort of a big job. And they had found someone through LinkedIn, and they corresponded, and he wrote back and said to my friend, "Listen, I looked up Raphael, and if you speak to him, tell him hi, because I'm the face model for Kaidan Alenko that he voices in Mass Effect."
Wow.
His name is Luciano Costa, and so we had lunch about a week ago for the first time, and it was so funny because we went out and we sat and we talked for a long time. He was a lovely guy, really great guy, and we were sitting there, and Luciano turned to me and said, "We got to take a picture. We just got to take a picture." And so I turned to this guy who was sitting next to me at this little coffee shop, and I said, "Excuse me," this guy with glasses and hunched over his phone. I said, "Excuse me." I said, "Would you mind just taking a picture of the two of us?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." So I said, it's a funny thing, because I said, we're in this video game together, and he's the face of it, and I'm the voice of it, and so this is the first time we've met. And he said, "Oh, what is it, like a sort of an indie game?" I said, "Well, yeah, maybe kind of indie. I mean,
kind of, yeah, indie, yeah, sure."
I said, do you know Mass Effect?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, do you know a character named Kaidan Alenko?" And he went, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, he's the face of it, and I'm the voice of it." And he went, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" So I'll do a picture for my Facebook page.
Imagine for that one lucky fan who just happened to be there and see that. That's wonderful.
So
that is
funny.
crazy.
I put the picture out on Twitter. If anyone wants to find it, it's Raphael Sbarge. You can find it. But it's Luciano and I, basically at this coffee shop. So it's sweet.
That must be a strange experience too, just to see the person who is a representation of the face of Kaidan, hear him speak and not hear your voice come out of his mouth, since that obviously is what you'd be used to seeing that face normally in the Mass Effect series.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got to be really trippy for fans.
I imagine.
Again, I look nothing like Luciano, and he told me, by the way, that because he's obviously a very handsome guy, and he does modeling, and he got called in, and they just did some shots, and they sat him in this in this space, and they did this huge I sort of a 3D, I guess, view of him. And they, spent an afternoon, and they did another afternoon, and he never thought of it. And then it was about a year or so later, and a friend of his called and said, "Yeah, I think there's this guy who looks so much like you in this video game." And I was like, "Really?" They said, "Yes." So I think that's me. So he didn't, he hadn't really thought about much about it being anything. But of course, here he is. And it's funny to think. I wonder if he gets recognized. People don't necessarily. I think I had once someone on the phone recognize my voice, and it's one of those sort of tech support calls or something.
Oh, really?
Like Time Warner or something, and they said, "Wait, I'm sorry, I have to ask you a question. Are you an actor?" Anyway, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you're there." And so they get. I think it's once that I've ever been recognized for my voice, but in this case, I do wonder if he gets stopped a bit, because he is. You can definitely see the angles of his face and the line.
No catch, really. It's dangerous work, but not for someone like you.
Well, that's very comforting. Certain death for some, fine for us.
Well, again, that kind of makes it perhaps a little more special for you, because it's that this is affecting millions of people and they love this character. And you can essentially be anonymous in the crowd and see the fact that they love this and not be flocked to the fact that, oh, I'm the one who's playing this character. It's an interesting perspective that maybe you wouldn't be able to get if there was success in this sort of fanfare surrounding your work in TV or movies.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I love working in this medium. It's just it's a wonderful way to work in sort of a very intimate and kind of small and precise way. It's not quite film acting, and it's not like stage acting. It's its own very unique thing. But it has inherently there's an intimacy in it. And I'm similar, I'm sure, to what you do in terms of working in radio, but being able to talk to the mic and allow people to feel like you're talking directly to them. That's obviously a skill that people evolve. Maybe some people are born with it, but I would venture to say is that probably a lot of people have to learn how to do that.
Absolutely.
But in terms of kind of how fun it is to do once you've sort of found that slot and way of connecting to people, it's a thrill. It's a thrill.
Have you actually right now, if you could, not to put you on the spot, what would you do? What sort of affect would you add? Or is there perhaps even an affect? I'm trying to pinpoint it right now that would make Kaidan Alenko. Can you give us a little bit, if it's not too much trouble, of Kaidan Alenko right now?
Fine. I mean, it's basically, Commander, I have to speak to you about where we're going. And
that's incredible.
Commander,
Sorry, continue.
I'm concerned about your choices here. I know that you've got the best interests at heart, but at the end of the day, we have to consider the guest. So,
that's incredible, because again, speaking to you, you're again very upbeat and kind of very genuine in what you're saying, and then you go into Kaidan and it's more serious. It's definitely more like that. So that was wonderful as a fan for that. I do appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. It's an incredible community, and I will be eternally grateful, eternally proud to have been a part of this, and I am very grateful to be counted amongst it. And I think BioWare is going to bring us a lot more wonderful stuff to come. I mean, even as the technology changes and as things grow, I think we're bound to see more and more exciting things.
Cannot wait for it. Now, one of the things that BioWare games really focus on, you kind of touched on it there, is the depth of what the characters can offer and what they get from their actors. Speaking in that vein is romances, of allowing the player who's playing a Shepard to have this role-playing actual romance with you as Kaidan, and even in the last game, allowing both female Shepards and males, to be involved in that sort of experience with Kaidan. As an actor, what is the difficulties of one trying to convey a real relationship, try and make it seem genuine when you haven't obviously seen the person, you're not having that reaction, and then having to do that for both sexes in the last games. It seems like a real tall order as an actor.
I was thrilled when they added the sort of male-male or female-female element, just because obviously there was a huge audience there, and I spoke to them, actually, the developers, about it, and they said, it's so interesting because we provided so many different choices and so many different things that were so different and new, and he said, and to be really honest, he said it wasn't like we left it out on purpose. It's just that it was just one more thing that we just hadn't done yet. But he said, having done so, they're thrilled. Obviously, what's amazing about the game for people is that you can cross gender. I mean, you can play a woman, you can play a man, depending on whatever it is that you want. You can play through in whatever capacity you want, and that is, again, imaginatively for any of us, it can be a fascinating experience to sort of see what it's like to be a woman and then as a man and play with engage with a female commander and then have that interaction. I mean, all of that, the opportunities and the sort of the complexities are fascinating. And again, that's what these games allow, is that you get to kind of go in down the rabbit hole and explore this. As far as the relationship, the writing is so wonderful and really allows for, again, these, between dealing with issues of, in this case, rank, and then in addition to the rank, then sort of feelings of, emotional feelings for each other, and obviously in Mass Effect 2, they were separated and kind of there's this huge kind of chasm that came between them. There is as I understand it, more women began playing video games as a result of Mass Effect than any other game. It really began to kind of bring women in, I think, because of some of these romance elements, because it wasn't just about shooting and killing, but it actually did create dimension relationship, and that was, again, thrilling that they were willing to kind of do this. I mean, as I said, at least initially, there's so many of the games that they would hire people for, which would be just about screaming, screaming, get down over there, shoot,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And so that's all fine. It's perfectly fine. And of course, there's some of that still in Mass Effect, but it's not all of that. And again, I think it's what has given us this, again, very, very strong, passionate fan base, is because people are emotionally involved with these characters. It's not just, an instrument to go out and shoot stuff.
It's more an instrument to experience what it would be like as these characters living in this world, you'd say.
It was so some of the responses when I read that love letter, essentially from Mass Effect 2, where women would say, there's one woman who said that she said she couldn't listen to it in the house with her husband. She had to get in the car and go down to the gas station and squeal and listen to it. So sweet.
Yeah, sweet's one word to describe that. Yeah, I'd say.
Right. I mean, whatever that is, it was, again, these emotions are real. Conversely, and I was blown away by this, and I ended up writing the woman to thank her for reaching out to me. But there's another woman who told me that her son had actually recently committed suicide, and that she had been unable to deal with reality, that it was just too painful to be in this world, and that actually Mass Effect had been sort of a way for her to actually kind of get through it and really kind of just keep herself together. And so she wrote me and thanked me for the letter, of course, and just, said how much it all meant to her, and how what a palliative it had been for her. And I mean, it made me cry, of course. And again, this, speaks to the kind of the power of what these things are. So again, these relationships, which are the hallmark, are at the center of these games and the writing, and clearly, very clearly in their conception, I think has created a difference. It really, they're more like movies.
Yeah.
That you actually get to interact with them, and you get to have these go on journeys with the characters that you love.
You get to be a part of The Sopranos for 10 seasons sort of thing. It's these long-winded sort of things, so you're a part of it for years and years, because again, like you said, you're playing not one game, you're playing 3 games that are several hours, and you really get that experience. So that's great, the story of that your work affected one person so much she was going through a hard time. So that's absolutely excellent. Speaking about a lot about dimension and relationships, the crew of the Normandy, the actors who play them, have you had the chance to meet them? And was that chemistry just kind of put together after the fact? Because there is, when you're playing this, that feeling that you are a part of this team, especially because you've been doing this for so long.
Yeah, I mean, some of that really, honestly, is magic on their end.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that they did, which was pretty cool, is they created their own proprietary software. I think it's called Veda. And what they are able to do, and this is unique in my experience in video games, is they were able to play the recorded cue from the other actor who had already laid it down. So if you said, where are you going? And I said, I'm going now, Commander, but I'll be back, whatever. In this case, they would be able to use the recorded voice from the other actor, so that you would actually be in real time, kind of almost doing an interactive scene, because you'd be able to hear. I mean, you couldn't see them, of course.
Like they're in the booth beside you, sort of thing.
Right,
yeah.
right. Now, it didn't happen all the time, and sometimes you would come in first, and so you would still be recording. They would get the benefit of your having recorded. But that said, very clever and smart and actor-friendly on their part to have sort of figured this out, because it really did. It does help. And I think also that I think, again, just kudos to the writing team, because I think that they really were able to kind of really be sensitive to our voices, as it were. I mean, not just our actual voices, but the characters, kind of, if you think of an orchestra, the horn section and the strings and the, and the drum, each one having its own place in the orchestra. I think they became very, very aware of how to kind of, balance those different, parts of the orchestra together. That is this team, and make them kind of really cohesive. I think they did that. They've done that masterfully, clearly.
Absolutely. Now, it's all done. Unfortunately, the Mass Effect series, as we know, the first 3 games are finished, but everything we talked about today was incorporated in their final DLC, the Citadel DLC, celebration of all the characters in the series. Even a shout out to Canadian Bacon and Beer, which of course is well received on here and in Toronto. When that was recorded, in your mind, was it developed in that sort of a way to have a send-off of the series? Because there's such depth. There's such integration of different characters. You're getting pretty much everyone that you had a chance to even talk to for a short period of time in the other 3 games, in this great sort of party atmosphere that's very tongue-in-cheek. How was that experience? And do you agree that it's that sort of send-off DLC?
Yeah, I mean, it was very much, it was a blast, and I know that they were having both fun and making it kind of a greatest hits kind of an experience. And Kaidan is from Vancouver, so I think that there were some nice kind of fun references as relates to all of that, and the Canadian.
What do we have? Canadian delicacy of some sort?
Sure. Exactly. We have beef, we have bacon, we have beer. The foods of my people.
And I know that the very last sort of goodbye scene, that is, the one where we sort of really knew that this was the last of it. I can tell you, we were all kind of wiping tears away when we were done. I mean, I'm alone in the booth, but the director and the writer who were in the booth up in Edmonton, I think we're all really moved by the enormity of it. I mean, realizing that we'd all taken this journey, and this was the last the last of it, and this was the kind of the final farewell. It really kind of hit all of us. Like, wow, to that end, actually, I did sort of a wild thing now that I think about it, actually. But what happens is this: when we record these things now, not in the beginning, but it's kind of like imagine a very large iPad in a way, and it's a big screen that comes up, and essentially your line is there, or some direction is there, and it says, what. Sorry, I'm looking for a photograph as I'm doing this at the same time.
Sure.
It says what you're about to do, what the scene is, who the characters are, and some brief description, right? And so what happened was there was a slide that came up, and I'm looking for it because I took a photograph of it. And when I was here it is. Oh no, hold on a second. It was essentially a final farewell, and when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, that was here it is. When I was at PAX East, I went to the head of BioWare who was there, and then also the head writer who I said, listen, I took this picture. Would it be okay to put this out? And they read it, and they said, yes. And I read this at the panel. I'll read it to you, actually. So it's the Citadel Final Goodbye. And this is the situation synopsis. Again, I posted this on Twitter if anyone wants to see it. So it goes like this. This is the final scene of the DLC and the last scene of the Mass Effect trilogy forever. This is the big goodbye to the fans, letting them know that we're moving on after this. Shepard's story is officially done with this scene, and in the scene, Shepard is standing outside the Normandy at the docking station. His entire crew is with him, all looking at their famous ship, the place they've called home. It's a warm scene full of nostalgia, and this will one day be considered the good old days. Shepard has a moment with his or her love interest, reflecting on good times, before everyone else peels off and boards the Normandy, except Shepard, who lingers a moment for the last time, for the last line of dialogue that he or she will ever utter in the game.
Wow. Well, that was, again, we could not think of a better moment to end off our interview. That was absolutely excellent. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Again, that is Raphael Sbarge, the voice of Kaidan Alenko, as he may be known. Any final word, for Kaidan fans out there?
Oh, gee whiz. I mean, I hope to find you out there on the internet, as it were, on Twitter, and I do read, what the fans say. So I look forward to connecting to you that way. And, it's been an incredible journey, and I'm just extraordinarily grateful. And to all the fans, for all the Kaidan fans, I hope to be able to stand beside you and salute you again, Commander.
Oh, very nice. This is Andy Borkowski, VGS.